any question
All
now.
questions, 1 minute.
All right.
1 minute.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, both at home and in our studio audience, and welcome to the HCAM 2024 Contested Races Debates. I'm HCAM News Director Tom Nappy, and I will be the moderator for tonight's debate. This evening, we will hear from 4 candidates running for the 2 open 3-year Select Board seats. Select Board is the one contested race in this year's town election. Our panelists this evening include Peter Thomas, Editor-in-Chief of HopNews.com, and myself, Tom Nappy. The candidates for the 2 open 3-year Select Board seats include Peter Mimma, Kyla McSweeney, Joseph Clark, and Brian Herr. Our format for these debates is simple. Peter and I will alternate asking each candidate questions, and they will have up to 1 minute to respond. If you hear the bell, you have 10 seconds remaining. If a candidate has a follow-up response to another candidate, they could state they would like to make an additional comment. The moderator will cue them, and the candidate will have 30 seconds for the comment. A panelist may ask a follow-up question, and the candidate will have up to 1 minute to respond. Following the question and answers, each candidate will have up to 2 minutes each for a closing statement. So with that, we'll get started with our first question. And our first question will be answered first by Ms. McSweeney. And it is, what do you feel are the biggest issues or challenges facing the town in the coming year? And if elected, what are your top priorities?
Great, thank you so much for your question. Thank you for having us here this evening. I think the biggest issues in our town right now, first and foremost, is our budget situation. We have a number of capital projects up on the town meeting warrant this year, and it is going to require a significant number of resources for our town. I think that is going to put many taxpayers, give them a little pause and say, you know, what's that going to do to my tax burden in the upcoming years? And having to really think about those decisions. Our other biggest issue amongst us right now, and I've heard from many people as I've been going about town and talking to individuals about my candidacy, is our water situation. The quality of our water has been not the greatest in the past years. We've made some improvements on that. Thank you. With the wells, but I think those are the 2 biggest issues facing us in our town right now.
All right, thank you. Joe, same question.
Yep, thanks for having me tonight. So I think the first thing that it starts with the lack of confidence in the leadership of the town, you know, the select board. You know, I've spoken previously about the number of employees we've lost over the last couple of years. You know, again, to me, that is a leadership issue, right? You know, municipal employees do not have incentives to go over to the town over and, you know, start the same career there. So something's been happening. You know, and how do we get confidence in the town hall? Because we've talked about departures in the police department and town hall. It's been a lot over the last couple of years. So combine that with all these other things that Kyla spoke very eloquently about, you know, capital constraints on the budget, drinking water, a lot of big ticket items, all that happening at a time when current residents don't have confidence in the people making decisions today. So I think it starts at the top. We need to make sure people in our town take pride in working for the town again. They're happy to work for the town, so they're doing a good job. And that's all departments across the board. So if we can't fix that issue with our employees, it's going to be really hard for the town to move into, you know, these next couple of years where, you know, we have to make some really hard decisions on how we spend the budget.
All right, thank you. Peter, same question.
Thank you, and thank you for having us this evening. So I think that we can always talk about some of the critical issues that are facing the town between the water quality and some of the personnel issues facing our police department, or whether they're dealing with our tough budget issues coming up. But I think that, echoing what Joe had to say, I think what we really need to have is good leadership at the top. And I think that what I can bring to that particular aspect of it is that I've devoted my career to the public service. I'm a 20-year attorney for the Commonwealth, and most of my work is devoted to conflict resolution, dispute resolution. And I think if we can bring that kind of calm sort of demeanor to the select board, I think that'll be very helpful to us in tackling all these issues together. Select board is supposed to provide oversight and leadership, and I think we can't do that if we're not able to take down the temperature a little bit within the community. I think I can help do that.
Okay, thank you. Brian?
I think the two top things I'd put on my list are, one, personnel matters, and two, our debt service, the amount of debt we're going to be carrying here for the next several years. I think both of those are going to drive all kinds of other things that we need to focus on and be concerned about. But those are the two big things. We've got an interim town manager in place today. I think Elaine's fabulous, and I think she's going to do a great job. But we got to figure out what we're going to do with that town manager role in general. And then I think, and from that flows a lot of other decisions that will be made. And then obviously, on the budget, as the others have raised, some legit concerns about the debt service line in particular is the one that bothers me the most. It is the one that's going to spike the most based on the decisions we've made as a community. And I'm concerned about a gap there that will put us under a lot of pressure here very soon. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Herr, thank you very much for speaking about the town manager search. This one goes to Mr. Clark first and then to all the rest of you. The town is currently searching for a new town manager following the departure of Mr. Kamalo. If you were to be elected, what qualities in a town manager are the most important to you?
So obviously, it starts off with their ability to handle the budget. Their background in municipal finance is going to be critical. We've talked about all these, the debt issues that are coming up that Brian keeps referring to. So that's table stakes for this. In addition to that, as I mentioned before, we need to reestablish confidence in the town hall. So we've had a lot of turnover there, and if we don't do a thorough search and make sure we have the best person, whether that is external from the town right now or internal, that is going to set the tone for how we, both attract and retain new talent into the town hall for the coming years. And personally, I think that'll set the tone for the next decade at the town hall. So getting that position right is one of the most critical decisions that we will make in the short term. So I will look with both, the financial capabilities and the leadership qualities to build that confidence.
Mr. Memo, same question to you. What qualities in a town manager are most important to you?
So I had an opportunity when I was in Northbridge to actually serve on a town manager search committee, and we were actually pretty successful in picking one who had been in place for 10 years after we selected him. And I think that the most critical is we need to have a very experienced town manager who can handle the variety of all the demands of town management, and that includes budgeting, it includes finance, it includes personnel decisions. We need to find somebody who's strong enough to have that, he or she is strong enough to have all that technical expertise, but also somebody who's also responsive to the select board as well. We need to have a good dynamic and a good rapport with our town manager to understand that the town manager is working for us, so it's subject to our oversight, but also someone who has that technical expertise to make sure that we're moving in the right direction as a town.
Mr. Herr, what qualities in a town manager are most important to you?
Well, number one, I think the town manager that we select will need to be a great listener. We have a really vibrant community here in Hopkinton. We have very high expectations of our local government, and somebody that's a great listener, I think, will bode well going forward. I do think that whoever we hire or whoever we place should be, and I say that intentionally, we should make sure they lead by example. The best way to win the hearts and minds of the teams that you work with is to lead by example and show them the way. I do think that the next town manager should be someone who has a lot of experience in a community such as ours. There are different types of communities in Massachusetts for lots of different reasons, and our community, with the expectations that we have internally, that's a special type of person that can fill that role. So those would be some of the key things that I'd be looking for.
Ms. McSweeney, what qualities in a town manager are you looking for?
So I agree that we need somebody that's going to listen, but I think it's more important than just listening, but building the relationships in the town, building relationships with the select board, building relationships with the residents in town, our elected officials within the state government, is going to be really important, as well as those in the other Metro West community, especially as we're working on important projects like the MWRA project. I think relationships is going to be very important. I also want somebody who is committed to a transparent government and who sets that tone for everyone. Both the select board and the town manager need to work to make government more friendly in Hopkinton and accessible so that people feel like they're heard and that their input is being included in government.
Can I add something to this real quick, Peter?
course.
I also think the individual needs to have a very strong personality. My view is that the town manager is the 6th person on the select board, but does not have a vote. But that person needs to be able to sit in there and kind of hang in there with the select board as they have their debates and not be afraid to weigh in and chime in, because they're going to help keep us on the straight and narrow sometimes when we could go off into the never land over here. So I think a very strong personality that feels they're part of the board but doesn't have that vote is really important.
Thank you.
Can I say-
Yes, Mr. Clark, of course, and then Mr. Memo, yes.
Okay, I really like what Kyla brought up about building relationships. It's critical to that into that position. And I think specifically when you think about relationships inside the town hall, in my mind, we need to get to a point where we have someone that's leading, and I know it's town manager, but the difference between leading and managing is very different. We can't have the town manager handling the day-to-day operations of all these different departments and committees. We need to make sure they lead, establish, credibility with the other leaders in those departments, and make sure those departments run on their own in the day-to-day. That will be critical to the happiness of our employees moving forward.
Mr. Memo, you'd like to add?
And I would also just add that I think that a town manager obviously has to have extensive experience in managing in collective bargaining agreements and negotiating collective bargaining agreements. We have a couple of them coming up. We also have a fairly contentious issue. It's going to have some resolution one way or the other. We're going to need to have somebody who's strong enough to sort of mend any fences that might come as a result of the particular issue that.
Would you elaborate on the contentious issue that
We're
you're
talking about the police department. We're talking about the Mr. Brennan. That's what we're talking about there.
Okay, well, thank you, guys. For Ms. McSweeney, you brought up transparency, and I think that's a critical element of the next question I'm going to ask. And this will go first to Mr. Memo. At the special town meeting last November, Hopkinton voters approved Article 2, which eliminated partisan politics in our elections. How did you vote on Article 2, and what is your current involvement with party politics?
Thank you for the question. When I participated in that vote on that day, I'm a member of the Hopkinton Democratic Town Committee, and I have been now for about 4 years. And I did not vote for that article. I wanted to maintain the parties and to have that influence within the town. And I joined the party about 4 years ago because I shared the same common values with the very same people who were there. We have a very shared interest in the belief that I think that government can in fact enhance the quality of our lives in our community, and I think in fact that it does. I thought that the vote at the time was very much in reaction to some of the misconduct in the 2023 election, and I thought it was a bit short-sighted in that respect. I make no apology for being a member of the Democratic Party. I do think that it's bigger than one person. It's better than one election. I'm a member of a group of people who are very much civic-minded, a group of people who care very much and very deeply about our community, and I'm very proud to be a member of the party as a result of that.
Mr. Herr, how did you vote on Article 2, and what is your current involvement with party politics?
I am currently unenrolled, and I supported that article and the disbanding of partisan politics in Hopkinton.
Thank you. Mr. Clark, how did you vote on Article 2, and what is your current involvement in party politics?
I voted to support it. I am unenrolled as well. I think personally, I've looked over the last couple of years, if we look at what politics has done in this country, and I want to be very clear, to me, this isn't politics. This is public service. This is, a town issue. This is not the same things that we're dealing with at a state or a national level. This is public service. So for me in the town situation, this was critical to me to be able to go unenrolled and show we are not going to divide the country or this town anymore. We need to come together as a town, and politics is not a way to do that. Just what's in the best interest for the town through public service without any affiliation to parties.
Ms. McSweeney, finally, did you vote yes or no on Article 2, and what is your current involvement in party politics?
I did vote yes on Article 2, and I am a member of the Hopkinton Democratic Town Committee. And as Peter said, to echo some of his comments, I joined this group because it's a like-minded group of individuals who share common values. However, that does not drive my agenda for the select board. In fact, I believe the agenda for my position on the select board is driven from the voters and the residents of Hopkinton themselves and their issues. And I feel very strongly in representing those issues to the best of my ability and hearing from as many people in town that can express those views.
Mr. Herr, when is it not okay to follow the direction of annual town meeting voters?
It's not. The town meeting is town meeting. We are a town meeting form of government. We're actually an open town meeting form of government. That's what's in the bylaws, that's what's in state law. We're an open town meeting form of government. We are not a select board form of government. Sometimes we think we are as a community, but that is not the case. Town meeting is the ultimate decision maker for everything we do in Hopkinton. The select board's charge is in between town meetings to get us ready for the next town meeting, but also to enact what the previous town meeting said to do. So we are an open town meeting form of government. I'm a big believer in following the general will of the town meeting, which is the general will of the broader community, because those that show up get to participate and vote. And when we do that, we build trust with the community. When we don't do that, we tear down the trust between the two bodies.
Ms. McSweeney, when is it not okay to go against the will of annual town meeting voters?
I have to say I agree with Brian on that. However, there have been articles that have come forward at town meeting that are illegal to be enacted. And so when there are legal constraints, as a lawyer myself, and with that experience, I understand those constraints, and we obviously need to abide by those.
Mr. Clark, when is it not okay to follow the direction of annual town meeting voters?
I agree with both of them. It's not okay. You know, I look at the select board as it is just 5 people in this town representing the town and the will of this town. So, you know, our individual opinions sometimes need to get put on the back burner when it's obvious the will of the town is going in a certain direction. We need to stick to that, keep that in mind through all decisions moving forward.
Mr. Memo, same question for you.
It's going to be more or less echoing what my 3 colleagues have sort of said here. I think that we ought to follow the will of the people, and that's reflected in the annual town meeting, unless, of course, for some reason that article is, or it declares for an illegal course of action. Of course, that should not be followed. But we're talking about interpreting the will of the people. It's one of the clearest ways of doing so, and it should be respected.
Mr. Herr?
Yeah, if I could add just real quick. I don't think that it's illegal that certain articles go before town meetings so much as it's not something that can be enacted per se based on that town meeting vote. Town council will not let an illegal meeting or article come to the meeting floor. And I think it's important at our next town meeting and the special town meeting to make sure that town council concurs that the article specific to the reinstatement of the officer is in order for town meeting. It's going to be non-binding like the Upper Charles Trails Committee vote was non-binding. But if the town meeting deliberates and then takes a vote and sends a message, I think that's an important thing for us to follow.
So, Mr. Herr, you just mentioned the Upper Charles Trails vote, which did pass town meeting, and yet, sorry, to clarify, the disbanding, instructing the select board to disband the Upper Charles Trail Committee did come before town meeting. Town meeting voters approved that, and yet the Upper Charles Trails Committee still exists. So, in that instance, the select board chose not to follow the will of town meeting voters. Would you like to weigh in on that?
Well, I don't know if town meeting instructed the select board because that would have been out of order. The town meeting could suggest to the select board to consider this because this is the general will of town meeting and the community as a whole. Instructing is like mandating, dictating, and then we could do it. But the bylaw or that law itself or that article itself was not going to be enforceable. So I think it's just the use of words there. But certainly the general will was clearly understood about the Upper Charles Trails Committee, which was to disband and start over. And I don't think that meant, completely ruining the whole process and forgetting about the Upper Charles Trails Committee getting work done. But I think the charge had to be reset, redirected for everybody.
Okay. All right. I'm going to throw in a follow-up question here. Can you explain how you have educated yourself more about current issues the select board faces, and do you attend town meeting regularly? Joe, we'll start with you on this one.
Perfect. So, I've spent the last month, connecting with people in the town, both just residents, but also people in different departments. It's well documented that I have plenty of connections through my family in town, in different departments, both, current and then previously. So that's really been a foundation for me to kind of go in and get different views on different opinions, right? Residents versus employees, there's a very different view on things, and so it's important to take all those things into account. For me, it's very easy to do that. I can't speak enough about, and I guess some people find it like, oh, well, Joe's a townie, right? Like, that means something to me because of the ability to go walk in to the fire department. If I have a question around something related to safety, I have no issue, and I did this about 2 weeks ago just to catch up with Chief Doherty. Walked in, he wasn't expecting me. I threw his afternoon into a bit of a crunch, but he was happy to talk and hear my thoughts on things, and I wanted to get his, so I will continue to do that. Was there a second part to that question? Or,
Do you attend town meeting regularly?
I have not previously in the last couple of years, but certainly you will see me this year and years moving forward.
Okay. All right, Peter, same question to you. Can you explain how you have educated yourself more about the current issues the select board faces, and do you attend town meeting regularly?
I do attend town meeting regularly. I had the opportunity actually to work, to help tabulate some of getting the people into the overflow room. I sort of helped out Connor in that matter, and then the last special town meeting, I went to other town meetings as well. I'm an elected member of the Board of Assessors. I attend all of those meetings naturally as well. And so what I've done to educate myself about the current issues is that I've attended a select board meetings. I had the opportunity recently to attend the one involving the Lake Maspinock. There was an awful lot of discussion about the weeds within the lake, and I thought that was fairly fascinating. I wasn't aware of that issue. And talking about the use of with the toolbox or kind of herbicides, we're going to use it or not. So I thought that was a fairly fascinating topic on that particular day. I've attended regular town meetings. It's a terrific process. I was actually very excited to see that they're using electronic voting now, and I thought that was a terrific innovation that Connor, the town clerk, has been sort of added to that. It's going to help efficiency with that. I've done an awful lot of reading in the last sort of 3 months or so, but I've tried to dive into all the materials. I know that my wife could certainly attest to that. I've been studying everything as best as I can. So, but it's been a great process so far. Good experience.
All right, thank you. Ms. McSweeney, can you explain how you have educated yourself more about the current issues the select board faces, and do you attend town meeting regularly?
Well, since my decision to run for the select board, I've been attending at home most of the time select board meetings so that I can be aware of the issues that they're discussing and what's going on during them. Occasionally I will attend in person as well. As far as town meeting, I have had a job, I have a second job where I teach at a community college, and unfortunately it's been on Monday nights. So I've often missed the first day of town meeting, but we'll catch up on the second and third day because our town meetings usually go to that. I've also spent a lot of time talking to our current select board members and others who hold positions in the town to update myself and get up to date on issues.
Thank you. Mr. Herr, can you explain how you have educated yourself more about the current issues the select board faces, and do you attend town meeting regularly?
I do attend town meeting regularly. I've been involved in local government since 2002, 2003, somewhere around there. If I've missed 1 or 2 town meetings, I'd be surprised. I like to go. Early on, I used to bring my bills, and I'd sit in the back room or the back of the auditorium and do my bills while people were going to the mics, kind of saying the same thing over and over again sometimes. So I used to do sort of multitask there. But once I got elected and was always very much part of the process, I was at all the town meetings. To get ready for this season this year, this campaign season, if you will, and to get ready to serve on the board again if the voters would have me. The most important thing that I did, and I do it all the time, even when I'm not running for elected office, is I'll go through the budget. Because if you follow the money in any business enterprise, you're going to see all kinds of different opportunities to consider different approaches. You're going to remind yourself of the different things that you used to work on in the past. For me, I've been through this many times, so going through the budget really helped me just kind of reset and get ready to go.
Thank you.
Well, you spoke about time, and everyone will tell you that the select board is a significant time commitment. Some have estimated 15 to 30 hours a week it can be between meetings, preparation, showing up for the ribbon cutting, all the things that a select board member is expected to do in this town, and not to mention your liaison commitments. Each of you has families. How have you how can you even find the time? And we're going to start with you first, Mr. Clark.
Yep, great question. I know for me, it started with, when I went to make this decision to pull papers, I had to talk to previous select board members, because that was my only concern. It's like, I wanted to do this, but I needed to make sure I could do it. Don't want to put the town in a position where I can't dedicate myself to what I'm signing up for. So talking through previous select board members, that really gave me a good understanding of what the time commitment was, walking into it, eyes wide open. But then from there, I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, but it's a dedicated decision. And unfortunately, it is time away from the family, right? I think we all have day jobs as well. So most of this work is going to have to be done in between our jobs and our family time. And I'm at a time in life where I've got 2 young daughters, 2 and almost 5. To say things are a little crazy is an understatement, as everyone here that has children know. What's a little bit more chaos added into the mix?
Or are you considering this just a break from the girls for a minute, right?
I didn't say that, Peter. You said that. Don't put words in my mouth.
Mr. Memo.
So I'm not quite, I've passed the sort of Joe's stage in life now. Now my children are a little bit older now. My oldest is now 21 years old, and so he's sort of moved on. He's out in college, and my youngest is now a freshman in high school. So there's a little bit of void there, a little bit more time, I think, at least on my end, that I'm trying to fill that void. But, it's... I'm not going to equate the two, but I am a member of the Board of Assessors. There isn't a commitment there. If you've ever seen an abatement application, it's going to make your eyes cross. But you have to study. You have to prepare for that. You have taxpayers coming in to see you and to make their case that they deserve an abatement. You need to be prepared for them so that you know that you're engaged, not just sort of going through the motions. And I do that regularly when every single meeting that we have with them. So that does take preparation. And so I think in terms of commitment, I think that I think I'm able to sort of make that commitment. I've done it with the assessors. I can do it. I'm confident I can do it with the select board. And, I've been talking to the current select board members, and they've given me all their valuable insight. And to show you that I'm not some sort of mindless partisan, I actually reached out to Brian Herr. I talked to a gentleman named Brian Herr when I first started. He gave me very good advice to think about trying to interpret the will of the community, how important that is. I talked to another gentleman named Brendan Tedstone. You may have heard of him as well. I don't think he's a Democrat, and we talked to him as well. And he gave me valuable advice as well.
But his advice was questionable.
It was not questionable. It was actually quite. It was. I loved the advice. I was glad to see him. I was glad to meet with him. The best part about that meeting with him was that I sat with him. Him and Mary Jo and stuff. But they were all together. We were all just talking like normal human beings. I can do that too. So, and I'm looking forward to doing it, hopefully.
Ms. McSweeney, how will you find the time? You mentioned a second job moments ago.
Do have a second job. Well, I'm also in a different stage of life. I'm in the tween-teen stage of life where my kids don't want to have a lot to do with me. So that helps out a little bit there. But I do think taking the time to do the homework is very important, and I enjoy doing that type of work. I enjoy being volunteer service. It's been my mission in life to give back to government and public service throughout my career. Both I've never worked for a for-profit corporation in my career, so it's been a lifelong kind of mission of mine to be able to do this work. And I think we had this conversation Tuesday night with Mr. Catino, offering some of his advice to us as he was asking questions, and that is very valuable advice and commentary that he included in the conversation as well.
Mr. Herr, no one on the dais knows more than you the time commitment that it takes to be a select board member. How will you find the time?
Well, somebody mentioned 15 to 30 hours per week. Maybe it was in the initial question. And I think that that's probably accurate. A sitting member is probably 15 hours a week. The chair is 30 hours a week. It can be a full-time job being the chair because it's a different kind of level of interaction with the town manager and other staff. So having done both, sit on the board as a member and sit on the board as a chair several occasions, I get it. I think for me personally, knowing what happens and know the stuff that repeats year after year after year, you get a rhythm going there with that stuff. It doesn't drain you as much. It doesn't take as much time to sort those out. But then there's the unique issues, and we have plenty of unique issues right now in town that will take some time. My wife and I became empty nesters last September, and our youngest is a freshman in college. Now we get another one in college, and the other 3 are out. So I've got plenty of time, and she spends a lot of time in Florida in the wintertime because she doesn't like the snow, and I like to ski, so it's a thing. But I can only clean the house so many times, so I'm happy to attend meetings. Thank you.
All right. The next set of questions is going to be an individual question for each candidate, and other candidates also have a chance to respond by request. First question is for Ms. McSweeney. In your candidate statement, you wrote, quote, "Having served in the role of director many times and under different circumstances, I have experience attracting and retaining committed and professional employees, and I appreciate the need to do so," unquote. It has been well publicized that both Town Hall and the Police Department have struggled to retain staff. According to the 2023 annual report, Town Hall welcomed 32 employees but lost 27. The turnover rate was 15%, while the national average for government industries is just 10%. What is your analysis of this situation, and what would you do to correct the problem?
Thank you for giving an opportunity for me to talk about this. I ran a child care center in my past where I had a number of employees. I was responsible for hiring and maintaining those employees. And if you know anything about child care, it's a very transient job where people tend to come in and out. I believe that the most important thing for an employee is trust in their leadership. And for our town employees, that means their select board and the town manager. They need to feel like they are trusted and valued, and that also that they have a platform to be listened to. One of the first things I'd like to do if I'm lucky enough to be elected is spend time talking to our employees and finding out what are the best parts of their job, what parts do they think can be improved, and what do they want for our leadership in town. And I think that's going to be a really important listening procedure. Already in my time, I'm type of the person, Joe talked about, walking into the fire station. I'm the type of person who will talk to anybody. So if I see a police officer on the street or another employee, I make the time to talk to them and listen to them already.
Thank you.
Mr. Clark, in your candidate statement, you mentioned resolving the drinking water situation is among the most important tasks to be done in the next few years. Clean and reliable water is expected of every municipality, yet Hopkinton's water is not clean, and it's also occasionally unreliable. In 2025, DPW expects to approach town meeting voters and ask for several $1 million to build a connection to the MWRA to provide water from the Quabbin Reservoir. Are you in favor of this plan?
Yes, I am. I think if you look at it, it checks both boxes for both quantity and quality issues that we're experiencing right now. And yeah, it's another large capital project that we're going to be facing, which is why I think we need to look at, going into town meeting this year, a lot of expensive things on the table. We've got to review everything and make sure, as everyone's alluded to, budget constraints, those are going to catch up to us eventually. So we need to start looking at things not just in this year, but long-term, understand the comprehensive impact of these decisions, each one. It's nothing individually stands out as strange on this town meeting list of articles. But when we look at things that we know are going to be on the list next year, like you alluded to, we've got to figure all these things out together and take them into account when we're making our decisions.
What is the select board's role in helping town meeting figure out what's important?
Well, I think, what is its role today, or what should it be, or what could it be? I mean, to me, it's, putting the right people in place and providing confidence around some of these things, specifically, why we're leaning one way. And as I would ask the current select board members, what are their opinions around it, and can they deliver that with confidence? And I think, long-term, as we look at this and we talk about reestablishing confidence, it's going to be critical as we make these next round of decisions, because, all of these decisions impact eventually what will be tax hikes, or potentially the worst case scenario, which I would never want to see, is budget cuts, right? Like, that's the most severe end of this, where, at the end of the day, going back to your drinking water thing, Hopkinton isn't Hopkinton if we don't have clean drinking water, if we don't have all of the departments, prepared and, working for us. So again, a comprehensive view of all of these things is what's needed.
Mr. Herr?
Can I add to that, please? The select board, we talked about 15 to 30-hour-a-week job. It's a big job. There's a lot of things going on, and we have a ton of stuff in front of us right now. Whether we go to the MWRA or not is a huge decision. And I don't think that the select board, with all the other stuff that they have on their plate, is going to be able to give that decision the time and attention it needs by themselves. So I mentioned recently that I think we should reinstate or go back to the Water and Sewer Commission. I think we should get 3 to 5 members, whatever it was before. Maybe you look at it probably for 5 now if it was 3 before, because we're a bigger community. And I think we should have folks really zero in on that issue because it's a huge decision. I've done business with the MWRA in the past. It's not easy. They can put you through the ringer. And I think we just have to be really careful and very deliberative and make sure we give it the time and attention it's due. So I would like to see a Water and Sewer Commission reinstated in the town.
Very quickly, Mr. Clark.
Nope, I completely agree with Brian's opinion to reinstate that, fully supportive of it. And I think the other thing people need to realize is if the town is all in agreement, even this year, if we wanted to go to the MWRA, that is not a quick thing. I think Brian just alluded to it. It will take years to do that connection, right? Permitting, going through the state approvals, that is not a quick turnaround. So we need to think about that stuff early because we are still years away from that actual connection.
Mr. Memo. Okay.
All right, next question. Mr. Memo, this is for you. As an attorney for the Commonwealth, you've cited labor relations and negotiation as one of your strengths. What are some of the ways you will advise Hopkinton's new town manager to employ as they negotiate with fire, police, and teachers' unions to ensure Hopkinton taxpayers receive a favorable outcome?
So that's a great question. I think that at the start of it, I would think that what we're talking about in terms of who's going to be leading negotiations, we're really talking about a town manager. It's like we think we go back to making sure we have a town manager who's strong in labor relations, has a strong background in collective bargaining, and I think that that is a pretty critical need at that point, making sure that person has that right experience to do so. And having a very clear sense of what the sort of the market is, making sure that we're negotiating terms that are favorable to the town, but also make sure that we're continuing to build up benefits and programs that will attract and retain employees. We heard an awful lot today about concerns about turnover. Well, let's make sure we have the right collective bargaining agreements in place that provides the correct, market value, market-ready benefits and wages. As a member of the Select Board, my role, as I see it, making sure is providing oversight and making sure that those negotiations are being run appropriately, I suppose, and making sure that what is presented to us as a board, if I'm going to vote on it and sign on it, I'm going to make sure as a member of the board that what I'm seeing here is in fact an appropriate collective bargaining agreement, that we're not giving away the store, but also I don't want to take a sort of a strong sort of authoritarian sort of management sort of role in this. It should be a collective bargaining agreement that reflects our values of the community, that we want good, productive employees who value their jobs and want to continue to work here. And so that would be some of the values that I would want to see from any CBA.
Thank you.
Mr. Herr, at the Hopkinton Women's Club Meet the Candidates Night, you brought with you a copy of next year's town budget. On that budget, I noted that the town, and you still have it, I see. Yeah. I noted on that budget that the town has $5.7 million in free cash, which seems like a lot to me. Does that mean that we've overtaxed the town?
Yes and no. It's more of a timing thing than anything else. Free cash is a bit of a misnomer. It's not free. It's our money. It's taxpayer money. It's money that was appropriated through town meeting, the governmental body in town, and then doled out to the various departments in prior fiscal year or prior fiscal years, because it can roll from year to year sometimes. And that free cash means it wasn't spent in the prior fiscal years, and it's now free to come into the next fiscal year. It has to go out to the state to get certified through the Department of Revenue and come back as certified free cash. Once we get that certified free cash, we use it as part of our revenue stream to build the budget for the next fiscal year. It used to be a few $100,000, $700,000, $800,000, maybe $1 million, $1.1 million, something like that, for free cash, kind of year over year. We now have that $5.7 million in free cash. What that says to me is that money, that $5.7 million, was probably taxed before it was needed by the departments in town. Now, there's ways that money comes to free cash, which is good. I call it, there's good free cash and there's not so good free cash. Good free cash is money that comes into the town because we save on our health insurance benefits, we save on some other things through the course of a year, and it adds into the free cash account. Not so good free cash is the cash that we dole out to departments that haven't really shown a demonstrated need for that cash, and as a result, it's piling up, and then we use it again. I'd rather leave the money in the taxpayers' pockets than take it too early.
A question for the rest of the members on the dais. Is there any part of the budget that stands out to you that worries you?
I was going to say that our debt rating, I think, is a concerning part of the budget. There was a call out right now in the budget that right now we have a AAA rating, and that could be in jeopardy with the number of capital projects that we have on this year's town meeting warrant.
Does that make you, as a follow-up, and I'd like to hear from you two, too, does that make you question the $48 million Hopkins addition?
I feel the $48 million Hopkins addition is essential for this community. I stated the other night, I have a daughter that's currently at Hopkins. She eats lunch at 10 a.m. There's children in the hallway receiving special education services. We cannot have a world-class educational system in Hopkinton and not pay attention to our schools right now.
Mr. Clark, Mr. Memo, anything about the budget that stands out to you?
I mean, I would agree with a lot of what Kyla said on the debt level. Specifically, you just went into the school project. Hopkinton has always been built on the school systems. We need to continue to do that. It's very important. We're at a point, though, right now where we're looking at, we've already got a really exciting project that's about to kick off, right, with Charleswood. So 2 school projects in this short period of time is a really challenging thing. So I think more, again, it's not against Hopkins School. It's just looking closely at how we're spending that money, what's going into that, what our needs are versus what we want out of that project, and making sure we deliver on the needs. And if some of the wants have to get put on the back burner, I'd love for that to be looked at more closely.
So, I mean, I'm going to more or less echo what my colleagues have said here, but I would add that, before the appropriations report had come out, I was more or less poised to, as far as the ballot questions are concerned, I was more or less poised to, the 2.5 overrides, I'm going to do what I usually do, is I'm going to very likely vote for them at town meeting. I'm still going to, as a voter, vote strongly for both the school-related, the Hopkins addition and renovation, the HVAC. We want our children to be able to breathe in the schools. And in addition to that, the water-related ones. I'm now sort of thinking a little bit that we might want to take another look at some of the other ones. I'm a little bit sort of reticent with regard to the other ones now, because I'm concerned about, the effect on our bond rating. I am concerned about that, and I share sort of the concern of the Appropriations Committee about future spending. And I think that we might have to do a little bit of belt-tightening with respect to that.
Peter, can I weigh in on just some of the other
sir.
budget concerns that I have? There's 2 sides to this. There's the revenue, what's coming in, what's our cash coming in, and there's our expenses. We've been talking about our expenses a lot with the debt service number going up because of the investments we're making in the community. So the expenses are going up, but I also see our new growth flattening out. And we've been living off new growth in many respects for a long time now here in Hopkinton. With Legacy Farms development, a lot of other development around town, our new growth numbers have been very strong. So this next year, for FY25, we're projected our new growth to be down $100,000 over the prior year. So it's starting, I think, and the land is getting tighter, right? It's starting to tighten up, and I think that new growth is either going to flatline or come down. So we're used to it always going up. So as we have expenses going up and our revenues coming down, we have this gap. And this gap is what I'm concerned about. This gap is something that I've seen it before in Hopkinton. We had a gap in 2008, 2009, 2010 when we went into the financial crisis, global financial crisis. And the governor at the time instilled what's called, or put forth what's called 9C cuts, meaning in the middle of a fiscal year at the state level, they cut the budgets, and they cut the budgets to municipalities. And we had a $2 or $3 million immediate problem in, I think it was FY 2009. So we went ahead and we put a hiring freeze in place at the town level. We put a spending freeze in place at the town level, and we managed it like a business would. And we shut it down for a couple of years. That worked out really well. We didn't have any major problems, and we got ahead of the curve. I think we have to be ready for some conversations like that in the next couple of years, or we're going to have a real big gap, and then we're going to have to do something else.
Mr. Memo, you'd like to add?
Just one thing to add here. I'm understanding that I don't believe that it would be a panacea, but I do think that we have an opportunity here in Hopkinton, though, to cash in on our recent Mass Bio Platinum status and try to help build up our commercial base a little bit there. We have a South Street corridor there that we have some empty buildings there, but we have an opportunity here to really sell our community. We're a great place to do business in terms of our geographic location. We're right on 495. We have optimal conditions to bring in large companies like the way we have there in Roslyn CT. Let's bring in more like that, and that may help bring in more revenue And I think that's this is an opportunity that we should not avoid. We should take full advantage of that. We have a economic development staff within Town Hall. We should support them. We should so they can outreach and do more marketing and bring in more business in here. That's an opportunity to sort of help us sort of, so then perhaps next town meeting, perhaps we're not asking for more 2.5 overrides, or we're not asking for debt exclusions because we're bringing in more revenue from that respect.
Can I just also say, the situation that Brian talked about is what I live in my daily job. Every day I work for the state, and we are very reliant on the budget, and we're starting to face cuts. We're in a hiring freeze right now for the state. And also wanted to make sense that this development that we talk about that is downgrading a little bit is also something that a number of residents are really pushing and looking forward to. They would like to see our development start coming down a little bit. It has effects on our school budget greatly, and with less development, we can hopefully rein in some of those school costs.
As a follow-up to that, Ms. McSweeney, the town of Westboro recently imposed a 1-year sewer moratorium. No new sewer connections can be made for 12 months. Would you support something as drastic as that in Hopkinton?
I'm not sure we're at that point yet, but I think there may be times when our budget is so severe that we might have to think about, measures that are more severe than we're doing right now. I think at this time we still have a healthy budget, and we don't need to make decisions like that.
All right. The next question is for all candidates, and we'll have Mr. Clark answer first. Is there any particular article at the upcoming annual town meeting or a town election ballot question that you feel exceptionally strongly about? And if so, what article, question, or topic, and why? Please just pick just one article, ballot, question, or topic, please.
Does that include the special town meeting as well?
Yes.
Yes.
So I mean, I would start with, and obviously it hits home for me personally, but the fire department, right? Some of the changes that need to be made at Main Street with the HVAC system that's caused damage to the roof. And again, growing up from a family of the fire department, it pains me to think about the men and women on our department who, in Hopkinton, most of that responsibility is not house fires, it's medicals. And I think last year, Hopkinton had over 2,400 medicals in the year, which is an outstanding amount. And so to think about our men and women going out, protecting the people, trying to save people, and unfortunately, as part of that job, loss of life incidents happen. Can you imagine doing that, coming back to the place that's your home for 24 hours at a time and having to deal with the roof leaking? That is completely unacceptable. And, we need to look at, again, this goes back to looking after all of our town employees. To me, that one hits home.
Thank you. Mr. Memo.
Thank you for the question. I think that for me, I think the article that I support and I would very much like to see passed would be the home rule petition for the senior tax exemption. As a member of the Board of Assessors, we regularly hear applications for exemptions for seniors, and we approve them when they're appropriate. And I think we have an issue here in town where we're possibly pricing out our seniors in our community. And so I think that if I strongly support the senior tax exemption. We're going to go ahead and allow for, those who are 65 and older, who've been here for more than 10 years, to essentially get themselves an exemption that's tied to borrowing, tied to the school development, school construction. So I support that wholeheartedly. As having been on the Board of Assessors, we've had opportunities to try to improve some of for our seniors as well, is exemptions in terms of trying to bring down, for the senior work option, trying to bring down the increase the amount of money they can earn from $1,500 to $2,000. We've done that. We've also brought down the age of eligibility for seniors to defer their taxes if they're eligible from the age 70 to age 65. So we're trying to do things like that. It's not going to be a boon to them, but it'll be helpful. And I think we should take a hard look at that. But I support the home rule petition. I urge our voters to support it.
Thank you. Mr. Herr?
There would be 3, 2 in a regular town meeting and 1 in a
We're only
special town
supposed to
meeting.
do one.
I know.
That is true. Mr. Herr, please play by the rules.
They're all tied together. So, well, 2 of them anyway. The budget, I would really like to see a very healthy discussion about the budget at town meeting this year. This is a budget. We can see the gap coming. In 2008, 2009, we didn't see the financial implosion and the gap happened, and we had to take some serious measures to address it. We can see this gap coming right now, and it's a legit gap. And for years and years, we always had a, quote, structural deficit, right? And outlying years for our budget. Appropriations Committee always did a very good job pointing that out. Nothing like this. This is millions and millions of dollars. So ideally, we all talk about this budget and we all understand that that's coming at us. Secondly, to Mr. Mimo's point, I think it's really important that the seniors do get a break from the schools and the investment that we're going to make for our children for the next several generations. And then third, the special town meeting, the situation with respect to Sergeant Brennan, I'm very curious to hear what town meeting says about that. One, I'm curious to hear what town council says, if it's in order or not. And if it is in order, I'm very curious to hear what the residents say about that issue.
I've already spoke to my favorite is the Hopkins School addition, and I'm unwaveringly supporting that initiative within the town.
Thank you all. Mr. Herr, did the select board handle the Sergeant Tim Brennan matter appropriately?
I don't think so, no. It should have stayed in executive session. All personnel matters should stay in executive session. I understand it came out of executive session at the request of the individual involved, but I do believe had they been a solutions-focused organization inside executive session, and I'm strictly speaking on what I've seen in executive session over the years. I have no knowledge of what happened in this particular executive session or executive sessions. I do think that it could have been resolved in a different manner. So, you know, I know a lot of folks are pointing a lot of fingers at a lot of different people around this whole issue, but at the end of the day, it's a leadership question, and I think that in an executive session, it could have got resolved.
Mr. Memo, did the select board handle the Sergeant Tim Brennan matter appropriately? And as a follow-up, and I should have asked this as well of Mr. Herr, why do you think so many people in town are upset about it?
Okay, so I think that, for starters, I think that the select board, in a sense, was, they had their hand tied in the sense that they had no choice but to hold that matter in public. That as a matter of, the open meeting law makes it very clear that if the person who is the subject of that personnel decision wishes to have it in open session, then it shall be in open session. So that was not an option for the select board. And as far as handling it, how they handled it appropriately, they had a Loudermill hearing, they read the charges to Mr. Brennan, and they made the decision at that particular point to postpone it, to try to give it an opportunity to resolve it. I don't know what happened in those sessions. You don't know what happened in those sessions. There are two parties to that failure, and as far as why that is why that wasn't resolved. It's not just the town, it's the union, it's the representatives from Mr. Brennan. If there's an opportunity to resolve it, it involved both of them, and we're in the position that we're in now because they couldn't come together on a resolution. As far as, the town has a case to make. They have a case to make. They have an issue where they have a person who perhaps withheld information and perhaps shouldn't have. The union has a case to make, in that they have a number of mitigating circumstances because as far as years of service, lack of disciplinary record, and sort of the reasons that may appear to be justified as to why you withheld that information. All of that will be sorted out in an arbitration, as it ought to be. A full evidentiary hearing sorted out by a professional arbitrator where he or she will weigh the evidence and render a decision, and that's where it belongs. The labor dispute belongs in the labor dispute resolution process. That's the bargain that we have as a town. The town made its decision, the union is going to fight it, and we'll have a resolution that will be fair and consistent with the law. I'm confident in that.
Ms. McSweeney, did the select board handle the Sergeant Tim Brennan matter appropriately? And as a follow-up, why do you think so many people in town are upset about it?
Oh, do you want to take?
No, I'm sorry, no.
Sorry. I have to agree with Peter on this issue. I believe that the select board did what they were responsible for at the time and handled the matter as they should. And it is an arbitration right now, and I don't think that we should continue to be discussing that as it's an active and open matter. And you asked why are people upset about that. I think the process appeared that people could have more input, but in reality, the process didn't allow for a lot of input. And I feel a lot of people had a lot of opinions that they wanted to express during the time. that they were not able to because of the limitations of the process of a louder hearing.
Mr. Clark, finally, did the select board handle the Sergeant Tim Brennan matter appropriately? And why do you think so many people in town were upset about it?
Yeah, I don't think so, because if you look, regardless of how you got there from process and personnel decisions, executive sessions, getting to the Loudermill hearing, at the end of the day, with all that stuff aside, it was on the select board to decide if he stayed or if he went. And going back to what we talked about, all of us earlier tonight, they failed to represent the will of the people of this town in that situation when it came down to the final vote. And again, when you look at it, it's a tough situation, gray area, but you're talking about a cop who's had an unbelievable record in town of supporting this community. And regardless of what he did or didn't do, you know, when I look at it, he played to the side of the victim in that situation. So there's a very human aspect of that I think, you know, needs to be mentioned. And again, I don't think the select board handled it when they had the opportunity to.
Peter, if I could weigh in, and you're going to like what I'm going to say here. I disagree with Kyla and Peter on this issue. The select board owns resolving the problem in executive session. They're talking about the Loudermill hearing at the end of a very long process. And that was a public thing, and the Sergeant Brennan asked it to go to a Loudermill hearing, et cetera. That's after they failed in executive session to get it resolved. That's where it should have been resolved. That's where it should have stayed. So I disagree that all the other stuff, the end stuff, like the Loudermill thing that everybody saw, everyone thought that was the way it was supposed to go. No, it was supposed to be resolved in executive session, like we've resolved countless others over the years in executive session. This isn't the first time Hopkinton's had to terminate police officers. It never happened in open session. If there was trust between the two entities, Sergeant Brennan and his team, and the town and their team, and the select board meeting, obviously, I think we could have resolved this thing in executive session.
Mr. Memo?
But the presumption here is that we know you have even idea as to what happened in any of those executive sessions for this particular case. You don't, because it was an executive session. The problem here is that it's again, going back to my original point, is that it's both the union representing Mr. Brennan's interests and both the town representing its own interests as well. And if they can't get together, I don't read that. I'm not going to default on the side that the town has failed to lead. There are two parties to every agreement. And there was no agreement there, apparently. The town sort of, it was very important to assure that there was, that the reporting was supposed to have occurred. That's their position. That's the case they're trying to make, and that's a position that they've taken. It has a valid point to that. But I think that we cannot make the assumption that the town failed in those negotiations when there are two parties to that. And if they did not reach an agreement, I read that as being a failure of both sides of doing that.
So the leadership doesn't own the responsible to be
Hurd,
leaders?
Mr.
To the
Hurd,
moderator, please.
through the moderator, yeah.
Okay, through the moderator.
Yeah.
So the leadership isn't responsible to be leaders? I mean, I think the leadership, I agree there's two parties, but one of those parties is in charge. And one of those parties.
You haven't really negotiated with unions then, if that's the case, because if you really, no, well, because I must tell you, because I must tell you that the parties to any negotiation, whether in a collective bargaining session, they are more or less equal. Whether you want to hear that or not is something entirely different, but that really is the reality.
That may be at the state level, but that's not the case at
That's
the local.
universal.
So,
That's
Mr. Clark, would
universal.
you like to add something to this?
Yeah, again, I think we're getting too caught up in the process and how they got there. At the end of the day, the question was about how did the select board, act? And I think more importantly, what the second part of the question was, why is the town so upset? Because when it came to a public situation with the Loudermill, you heard the will of the town at that meeting. And then it resulted in the select board having a public vote, and they voted against it. They did not hear the will of the town. We talked about how important that is. It's 5 people representing our town of 19,000. So I think there was a missed opportunity there, and that can't be understated.
Mr. Memo, final thought on this.
So but have we heard the entire will of the entire community on this? I wonder about that. But to a larger point on that, we're talking about fundamentally a personnel issue. And, we hire and we entrust our professional staff, our managers, to handle personnel matters. We don't put up hiring decisions up to town meeting. We don't put firing positions up to town meeting, decisions up to town meeting. Those are entrusted there for a reason. Otherwise, I think it's an invitation to chaos. We entrust our professional staff to do the hard work and to manage our town appropriately.
So then, if I may, are you implying that Article 5 of the special town meeting, which would ask special town meeting voters to direct the select board to reappoint Sergeant Brennan, do you feel that that's an inappropriate article on the warrant?
I think it's entirely inappropriate. I think that I made that clear at the candidates night the other night as well. We have a collective bargaining process in place for a reason. It's not just a piece of paper. It's a legally enforceable document. It's something that the town and both the union and negotiated, hard-fought victories, hard-fought negotiations, and it makes it very clear that when there's a dispute about the decision of a town management, the way it is resolved is through a grievance process. And if you can't solve it through the grievance process, you put it to an arbitrator. That is how it's supposed to be. And so if we're going to, I think that if we start putting up personnel decisions up to town meeting, it sets a terrible precedent. So we heard an awful lot this evening about a budget crunch. Well, what if somebody comes up with the idea, I have an idea. Let's take all the wage calendars that we have in every collective bargaining agreement. Let's reduce them to nothing and just pay every town employee $15 an hour. While we're at it, why don't we put a town meeting vote where we reduce every department down by 50%? Let's do that too. That is an invitation to chaos. Personnel decisions belong in the personnel world, not a town meeting.
Mr. Herr?
All the stuff around the Loudermill hearing and the collective bargaining agreement, and I agree that that's all in place. That all happened at the end of a process. The beginning and middle of that process is where it should have been in an executive session and it should have got resolved. It failed, the select board failed because it went public. That's my point. And when it went public, you're right, there was a collective bargaining process that will now carry forward, and there's gonna be arbitration going on for a couple of years probably. But the failure was way back here, and we're not talking about that. That's where the select board owned it, and that's where it failed, and that's where we did it many times over the years, and it never went public and got ugly like this.
If I could ask a follow-up on this, is anyone on the dais concerned about the potential legal exposure that the town has now from a lawsuit from Sergeant Brennan, as you guys have both talked about, from potentially the leaking of the survivors' information? I mean, is anybody thinking about that in terms of the town's liability?
Well, there's an awful lot to unpack there. I mean, I think in terms of, there are really two separate issues. As far as the disclosure of information, that raises a very serious issue. But but in terms of the issue involving Sergeant Brennan and the labor arbitration procedure and the grievance process, for me, that's fairly routine. When you have a dispute, if management and labor can't get together, then you put it before an arbitrator. Yes, there's a cost of doing business, and that's how we do business, how we've always done business in terms of in a unionized environment. That's how disputes get resolved. If you can't resolve it through grievances, then you have an arbitrator sort it out for you. In terms of the liability for the town, it's going to be pretty well specified and defined. It's in terms of, we're talking about the potential of back wages, we're talking about the potential for paying an arbitrator's fee. And that's more or less strictly what we're talking about there in that respect. So, but the other part of that question, I think, would be a more greater concern to me than the cost of the liability for Sergeant Brennan's arbitration.
I think beyond the things that Peter mentioned, the back pay and arbitration costs and things like that, I think there's damages. And I think that the town should be concerned about any damages that folks may want to seek. We have insurance, so insurance covers a lot of these things. It may not cover everything, however. So we have to be careful with that, but I think there are several liabilities out there that we have to consider.
I think we should move on from this topic. Mr. Clark, just a few minutes ago, you talked about the fire station next door. And this is a question to everyone first, and we're going to start with Ms. McSweeney. The fire station is falling into disrepair. The Woodville station has been uninhabited since the pandemic. In a few days, special town meeting voters will vote to fund or not repairs to the firehouse, both firehouses. But this seems drastic that it has to come before voters. What steps will you take as a select board member to ensure that our public safety facilities are maintained to a higher standard?
Again, I think we need to make sure that we're monitoring and listening to the employees that are inhabiting those. Obviously, the fire personnel at the fire station know of the issues that they're dealing with in their day, and we need to make sure that we are hearing from them about those issues. As a former resident of Woodville, I have an affinity for the Woodville fire station myself, and it was great that we had some ability to use that during the pandemic, and need to make sure that that is in good repair.
Mr. Herr? Fire station.
The fire station's not that old. The fire station, I think, was built in 2000, 2002, somewhere around there. It's not that old. It's been plagued with problems since the day it was built. Like a year or two after it was built, we had roofing issues and we had leaks. There's been all kinds of issues for whatever reason over the years with the fire station. It's very frustrating as a taxpayer and somebody involved in local government that we've had to put up with this sort of on a routine basis. We need to get it in order. We need to make sure it's a safe place for the folks to work, and I'll support the article. But it has been a challenge for us for a long time, the fire station in Hopkinton. And, while I don't know the Woodville station, I'm not sure how often that ever has been used over the years. There was many years there, even before the pandemic, we didn't staff it at all. It's a cool little spot, and I think it can help us with public safety for that side of town. I know we do it for certain occasions like the marathon. At some point, we may have to look at a second station in town as well.
Mr. Mimo, what steps will you take as a select board member to ensure our public safety facilities are maintained to a high standard?
Well, I mean, I think that, as an initial matter, I think that our public employees in town deserve the best that we can give to them. And I think that, from when we're hearing about, sort of the deficiencies in the fire station, I think that's quite disheartening. So I think that, we need to support, I think, sort of the capital programs in order to sort of, make sure that these buildings are up to speed. So if there are issues with the roof, if there are issues that needs to be repaired, and I think I would fully support assuring that, the funding is there for that and making sure that those buildings are up to speed.
Mr. Clark, finally, I know that you feel strongly about this. What steps will you take as a select board member to ensure our public safety facilities are maintained to a high standard?
Yeah, I think from steps, we need to be proactive in looking at maintenance of all of our town department facilities, right? We need to get ahead of these things. We can't wait till something goes into complete disrepair. It costs a lot more money when you do that. A lot of these times, simple routine maintenance can prevent large situations which we've had occurred. And then more importantly, when you look at it, I shared my opinions on Station 1, so I'll leave that one. But if you look at Station 2, it's been referred to, I think someone said it as like, it's a cool part of Woodville, right, to have there. If you've been inside Station 2, it is not a cool place for our men and women to stay. They can't do it, right? It's too small, it's not up to standards that we expect for them. And then when you put aside the actual firefighters, and when you look at kind of the residents here, this is a public safety issue as well, because if you look at response times, we have neighborhoods over on the Upton side of Hopkinton. That response time in, call it just for an example, like cardiac situation, right? That response time difference from Station 2 to Station 1 could mean the difference in saving someone's life. So it's not just a firefighter's issue, it's also a public safety issue that needs to be addressed and thought about when we think about those things.
All right, thank you. All right, our next question is for all candidates. And we'll have Ms. McSweeney answer first. Other than you, who do you believe is the best candidate in this race and why?
I've gotten to know my fellow colleagues here, and I believe the voters have a really difficult choice ahead of them on May 20th, that we all bring different and very strong opinions to the fray, and are all qualified and professional individuals.
All right, thank you. Joe, same question.
Kind of echo what she said. I love that people came out this year and we got new faces involved. I think everyone here is qualified because, again, I believe that we need kind of change in town. And when you ask this question, I think we've all talked over and over about the approaching debt issue. Like, that is a real thing. And, while all of us are qualified, there's only one other person here that's actually dealt with that, and that's Brian Herr. So his experience with the budget, municipal finances, and again, I come from my first 5 years, I was in accounting and finance. I am very comfortable with budgets, with numbers. I do not pretend to know municipal finance at all, right? It's something that has to be learned on the job. So I think Brian, separates himself with that knowledge.
All right, Mr. Mimo?
So, I'm going to echo everything that we just heard there. So we have four very good candidates. We have a son of Hopkinton in Joe Clark. We have a gentleman at the other end of the table who's actually done the work before as a select board member. When I think of Kyla, I think of a candidate here who can provide us executive leadership, a person who has extensive experience when dealing with grant writing, and when I look at that kind of experience, someone who has obviously a lot of work with the Commonwealth, I think that's invaluable. And no offense to the other two candidates, but I would very much like to see Kyla in there.
All right, Mr. Herr.
It's a great question, and it's not an easy answer, because there's really good people, all very positive, well-intended people. We can have disagreements and have a little debate, which is kind of fun, so that was great earlier, thank you. But I think that, if I think back on my years on the board, and I think about the last term that I served through May of 2021, one of my concerns leaving office that year was, who's next? Who's going to where's the next generation in Hopkinton to step up and, run the community? Unfortunately, at the end of 2021, that didn't really happen. Mrs. Kramer stepped forward, and she came back onto the board, like myself now, perhaps. And, so we didn't turn it over. We didn't train the next generation. And that is a concern I have, not only for the select board, for many boards in town. I think we've got to get that next generation of folks, the young parents, the young people in town involved. It takes some time to learn these things. And so for those reasons, I'm really pleased that Joe came out to run this year. I think he can represent that next generation, and given his roots in the community, he can go out and recruit additional people of his generation to get involved in town government and carry us forward into the future. So that's why I support Joe.
Candidates, we have 3 questions left. The first is to Ms. McSweeney and then to the rest of you. At the 2023 town meeting, voters passed a more than $100 million budget with essentially no debate. But we spent more than an hour debating an amendment to the leash law. Will you please offer your thoughts on that?
Again, I don't think our government is transparent and accessible to the general population in Hopkinton. I think voters care very deeply about these issues, but as Mr. Herr said, reading the budget, how many people actually print it out and go through line by line like Brian has? I don't think a lot of people feel they have that expertise to go through that and do that. So I think there are a number of different ways that we can help make government more accessible and transparent for people and foster a better debate in those issues.
Sorry, Mr. Memo next.
Sure. So one of the problems of being an attorney is that you read these documents and it reads legalese is sort of it's the bane of our existence. And so when you do read, say, just the warrant, you read the articles, and you sort of what exactly are we voting on here for? What precisely does this mean? I do think that to Kyla's point, I think that accessibility is very important when if you're in a room full of about 300, 400 people and they want to know what precisely is going on, they should have a very clear idea of what, in plain language, is what some of these warrants mean and what some of these articles mean. And so, to have an entire $100 million budget passed, of course, of a few minutes, is really indicative of, we can do a better job of explaining, a better job of making people want to be more engaged. That would only occur because the town meeting members let it happen. If people, I suspect that if there's more accessibility as to what precise it is that we're passing, then I think that there might be more people putting up a hold. I want to talk about this, or a hold, I want to talk about this item. Maybe perhaps we need to take another hard look at that.
Mr. Clark, 0 minutes on a $100 million budget, 60 minutes on a leash law. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, I'm going to focus on the budget side, not the leash law. And you look, Hopkinton's always been a fortunate town. We've always had the best school systems, some of the best resources around. I think back to learning to drive in this town, and some people may not realize this, especially in recent years where we haven't had any snow, but I remember driving from Hopkinton during snowing events, crossing over the other line in a different town, and noticing the difference in how the roads were kept up. It was a noticeable thing. Obviously, it's left an impact on me, but we've always had that across the board. So when we look at these budgets, it's, all right, we need to keep, supporting our town government, or I should say our departments. But it's also kind of getting us in a situation that we're talking about with, the debt issue. So it's just the need to look closer at it. I like their points they made on transparency. We talk about these things as big ideas and, big investments, that's the right thing for the town, but we need to look closer at them and what each investment actually means. And, that's on all the residents to, get involved more and understand it a little bit better.
Mr. Herr, $100 million in a budget that passed with no debate, a leash law that was debated heavily. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mentioned it earlier when we asked about what articles I was most interested in for town meeting, and the budget being one of them, obviously, because it's 125 million now this year, 123. And, there's a huge debt service line in that number. That said, having served on the board for many years, there are three things that get Hopkinton more energized than anything else: trees, trash, and trails. Those three concepts, those three issues, those three opportunities for the community drive a lot of passion in town. And whoever's fortunate enough to get elected, if trees, trash, or trails is on the agenda for that meeting that night, be prepared to stick around for a couple extra hours because it drives a lot of energy for whatever reason. The leash thing doesn't surprise me either. It's a one-off, I guess. But, we do get passionate about what we do here in Hopkinton, and I think that's healthy. But, focusing in on our $125 million budget, I think is healthy too.
To Mr. Clark, the Permanent Building Committee has recommended that the town sell the center school property to a private developer. Are you in favor of this? Why or why not?
That's a challenging one. I look at it from, both the personal level of being a longtime resident and also, what's in the best interest for the town. And I think right now, because I believe we've looked at, I think Hop News laid out pretty well, the different options in front of us, the costs associated with them. That was very helpful, I think, for talking to a lot of residents. But looking at it, why does it have to be just the three options on the table today? Why can't we look more closely at it? Because, we're at a time where we've talked about, long-term spots for the town hall employees. So to me, we need to be extra careful about how we, decide to sell our assets that we have, because it's really tough to make one decision once you've already gone down and got rid of some of your assets. I think from a position of leverage, if we're negotiating with, different spots of the town to look for long-term homes for our employees, we're in a better shape if we have multiple buildings to decide on. So I'd like to continue looking at those options more closely.
Ms. McSweeney, are you in favor of selling the center school to a private developer?
So I think the array of options is enticing. I think there's more work that needs to be done before we make a decision on one of them. I believe that some of my feelings about what needs to be done is it shouldn't be costing the town a lot of money. We're already spending a lot of money in many different places we've talked about many times tonight. I also feel that it shouldn't add to the burden of our school system. Our schools, we're finally getting to a point where we're able to accommodate the needs in our schools, and to go and push that further is just going to incur more expenses with the town. I also am concerned about the traffic situation in town. Several residents have talked to me, and I've listened to them about traffic around the town common is concerning, and what we do with the center school is going to have an impact on that.
Mr. Memo, should the town sell the center school to a private developer?
So, again, I'm going to echo what we were hearing earlier today from the other two candidates. So I do think that, we do have an excellent, I think, array of options here in terms of a mixed-use residential use. As I've read, I think we can talk about a first floor of that. I think one of the local options, local developers are talking about having a mixed use use of that particular building. That seemed to make some sense. But I do sort of share the concerns of sort of having additional problems with traffic, additional problems with some of their utilities. I think that we need to sort of be mindful of that.
Mr. Herr?
So a couple of thoughts on this. One, for us, if we keep the building, okay, and we keep it standing, which I think most residents would love to see happen, the money to bring that building up to code will be enormous. Talk about that gap, it's going to go up a couple $1 million more. Being in the construction business for a long time, there's a lot of money there to rehab that building and bring it to code, to use it for anything. The front building I'm talking about. The back building can get torn down. It's not historical. It can just go away. So if we keep it, there's a lot of money there, and I'm not sure we're in a position to be funding that right now. So, and I emphasize the word if we keep that front building looking the way it does, rehab it, make it safe, keep it looking exactly the same. If the town has the first right of refusal to use that front building and pay a lease to the developer to occupy that building for town offices, if that's what we decide we do. And if all the parking and everything else specific to anything that goes on behind that with the developer is kept off the streets, off the common parking areas, all on property where the developer's gonna do their work, I would support some kind of transaction to sell it, yes.
Mr. Clark, you'd like to add?
Well, I think, Brian, you bring up an important thing, because we've been talking about like being budget conscious with decisions and stuff, and while it is an investment, I look at that, if the town was to decide to make an investment on Center School, at the end of the day, though, we would have an asset that's more valuable, and that would allow us more flexibility potentially to make long-term decisions, because right now, I think we've talked about selling it for, what, $100,000? That's essentially the worth of, a large property and a big historical building. So I want people to think about that as well, because I think there's some long-term benefits of an upfront investment there.
All right. So the question up next might be the most challenging of the debate. Do you think the Boston Celtics or Boston Bruins will win the championship this year? Joe, you can answer first.
Both, yes.
Peter?
Banner number 18 is going up this year,
All right.
and been the next Stanley Cup since 2011.
I like it. Brian?
So far, so good. I mean, they're both doing quite well, so I think there's a good shot, yeah, that'd be cool.
All right. Kyla?
I certainly hope so. After our season with the Patriots, we need some good news.
That's very
Absolutely.
true.
Well, we want to thank you all for your participation today. And we will now give you each 2 minutes to make a closing statement. Mr. Mimo, we'll start with you.
Oh, well, thank you very much. First, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to both of you today, and also to the audience and those who are listening and watching to this evening. My wife and I, we moved to Hopkinton in 2015, and we moved here for a very simple reason, because it's a beautiful community with beautiful schools, and they did not disappoint. And we were absolutely, it was the right fit for us and our family at that time. And I want to continue to see our town continue to grow and grow in the right way. We have an opportunity here in Hopkinton to make sure that we do so. We have an opportunity to build an important school, an important addition to that's going to be vital to making sure that we continue to offer a world-class education to our students. We have an opportunity to offer targeted tax relief to our seniors. We ought to do so. We have an opportunity to pass a green initiative and get ourselves our new construction in town, so they can help us bring our net emissions down to net zero if we can do that. An admirable goal, we ought to do that. We have an opportunity to do all these things, but we're not going to do it if we're going to be divisive. And I think that we can do it if we work together. And my campaign is premised on the notion that I think that I can bring to the select board a dispute resolution background. I think I can do that. I think I can offer that. And I do hope that in the weeks to come between now and May 20th, that I hope to have an opportunity to talk to you and earn your vote. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Herr?
Well, thank you all for coming tonight, and thanks for those at home that are watching. I think this evening you saw 4 individuals talk about some issues, a couple of them that are pretty dicey issues, with respect and a reasonable tone, as we sort of sorted through what the different opinions were. And I think that's great. So I'm very optimistic about the future of Hopkinton based on the candidates that sit here this evening with me tonight. And I think that with that, there's an opportunity for us to reset and refocus on moving the community forward as one entity, one town, right? Not the school crowd, not the police crowd, not the fire crowd, one town. We all move forward together. And I think, I'm really pleased with the candidates that came out this year. My candidacy is a little bit different in that it's one kind of like, back to the future almost. I think that if the residents value that experience and things that I've seen in the past and want to bring me back to create a little bit of stability on the board, I would be happy to serve again. And, I'll leave it to the voters to decide, but I'm really excited about our future, and I'm really confident that we're going to stabilize things, and the waters will calm down, and I do think that we can move ahead together. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McSweeney?
I agree. I think working together for Hopkinton is my mission and the way this needs to go. To be frank, we all have a lot of experience, and we all have a very strong feelings and wanting to do for Hopkinton. I'm obviously the only woman in the candidate race, and I think that brings me a unique perspective. I've been able to be on the ground and talking to people in different aspects. I'm involved in my kids' activities as a Girl Scout leader. I'm a member of the Hopkinton Running Club and a book club in town, where I get to hear from a diverse perspective of individuals, and that's kind of the cornerstone of my campaign, to go and listen to those that are not the vocal majority. You've referenced it before. Hearing from some in town that are unhappy with some things. I've also heard differing perspectives in town from different individuals, and I think that I'm uniquely positioned to that. I also feel that my budget experience in working for the state is going to be an asset to the town of Hopkinton. I manage about 50 budgets for different state grants across the way, and ranging from about $200,000 to over $1 million. And we make sure that those budgets are sound and that they're regulatory sound, I guess. I also feel, as we talked about, very strongly about listening to and retaining our town employees. I think the town employees are the lifeblood of our town, and they make it work, and they make it the good town that it is, and that they need to feel respected and heard in their time. I also, as we've talked about tonight, also really believe in this idea of transparency in government and making government accessible. Many of our residents haven't been to town hall. Many of them don't even try to participate in town meeting. We really need to work harder to engage the vast majority of voters and residents in Hopkinton and make sure they all have a voice. And thank you so much for having us here tonight, and thank you for everybody listening.
Thank you. Mr. Clark?
Awesome. So I thank everyone for this week. For me personally, it's been great to get to know these other candidates. I have a lot of confidence, no matter which way this vote goes, that we'll have two people qualified and in the best interest of Hopkinton. And again, I think we've handled this all, respectfully. And because I go back to my point, this is not politics to me. This is public service. That's the thing we need to keep in mind. And we've had a lot of talk about the future of Hopkinton this week. And I think everyone's kind of shared their reasons why they came to Hopkinton, the charm of this town. I want to remind everyone, I represent that reason that people came to town. My family, they've worked in all the different departments of town. We've provided great schools, great resources to the town, great services. And we can't understate the importance of that, when we think about the future of this town. How do we retain that charm? In addition to that, as we look over, potentially a couple challenging things, obviously the vote on May 20th is the most important, but the town election or the town meeting on the 6th, we need to get more people out there. That's my ask of everyone. Get to town meeting. Specifically, the other reason I wanted to get involved this year was my generation cannot wait to get involved. Obviously I would love to, have the opportunity to have a bunch of free time on my hands with my kids out of the house, but we cannot wait that long. And so my ask to everyone else in this town of my generation is don't wait, get involved. It doesn't have to be, a huge commitment. You can start, we have plenty of boards and committees for people to get involved. That will be critical to the future of our town. So to me, that starts in 8 days with the town meeting. So we need as many people showing up there, and then of course the polls on May 20th. But, I really look forward to keeping, the charm of this town and what's in the best interest of Hopkinton long term. And that's all departments, right? We need balance across them all. We can't just have one department get all the benefits at the cost of others. So doing those things, I look forward to the future of Hopkinton. Thank you.
Well, that concludes tonight's Select Board debate. A big thank you to our 4 candidates for participating. My co-panelist, Peter Thomas, editor-in-chief of HopNews.com, and also a big thank you to the HCAM team for broadcasting tonight's debate. We wish all 4 candidates the very best of luck in this year's town election, and we thank you for your willingness and efforts to serve the community. We remind you to vote in this year's annual town election on Monday, May 20th at Hopkinton Middle School. Polls are open from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. Also, Hopkinton's annual town meeting takes place starting on Monday, May 6th at 7 p.m. at Hopkinton Middle School. Please attend and have your voice heard on what happens in your community. For everyone here at HCAM, I'm Tom Nappy. Have a great night, everybody, and goodbye.
Just outside, someone like,